So our next presentation is towards a multidimensional paradigm of archival description. We have Jamie Lee, Sandy Wang, and Halisa Jailani. Jamie Lee is an audiovisual archivist from the National Archives of Singapore. She adopts a holistic approach to archival access, spearheading curation projects that illuminate lesser-known historical narratives while advocating for robust metadata management and thoughtful applications of technology. As of 2025, she has been a member of the International Council on Archives Expert Group and Archival Description, which develops and publishes records and context standard. Sandy Wang's an archivist at the National Archives of Singapore, where she facilitates access to public records. She works on developing workflows and improving data quality for operational processes, collection management, and public access. She's also an active new professional of the International Council on Archives New Professionals Program 2025. And finally, we have Halisa joining us, a senior principal librarian for resource discovery and management at the National Library Board, Singapore. She oversees information professionals responsible for the bibliographic function of NLB, including cataloging, ontology management, and linked data. She serves in the International Federation of Library Association, IFLA's bibliography section, and is a member of the DCMI Governing Board and the RDA Board. Thank you so much for presenting for us today, and I look forward to seeing what you have.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Sandy, and I am from the National Archives of Singapore, along with Jamie, who's also from the National Archives of Singapore, and Halisa, who is from our National Library Board. So we will be sharing on the National Archives of Singapore's experience and experiments with records in context, which we'll be referring to as RIC, what we have learned from our experiences, the challenges and opportunities that RIC provides for archival descriptions, and integration with library resources. So before we dive into that, I would like to give you some context to NAS collection and how it has been shaped by organizational changes over time. So as you can see from this timeline over here, over the years, the source of our collection is not just about colonial records. The source of collections include the bulk of it, public records from government agencies and records from private sources as well. So we also see an increase in the type of formats in the records that we have in our collection, ranging from file records to oral history and audiovisual records. So the latest legislative change also resulted in the National Archives being part of the National Library Board, and that creates the impetus for some form of integration. And with that, that leads us to our current situation, which we have summarized into these problem statements. So first, the National Archives mandate is to manage the records and archives of the Singapore government, which we'll call public records. And in archival description, it's essential to capture the provenance and context of these records, not just for systematic management of the records, but also as key to maintaining the authenticity and evidential value of them. However, capturing information about the provenance and context is often difficult, and as with many countries, public agencies may get reorganized or dissolved. And say, for example, if an agency gets reorganized into 4 different distinct agencies, which successor agency would get to keep the record, who does the record belong to now, and on what basis? We also face the situation where records of different formats, including now library materials, require us to capture different types of information. So imagine or compare a file record that is static with an audiovisual recording that is time-based. We would need to capture information such as a duration for audio visual record and oral history, and not so much for for file record. Library materials also have different descriptive practices, and that poses challenges to integration. And finally, we also are in the landscape where user needs are evolving. So users' information-seeking behavior and expectations have evolved because they interact with systems that retrieve and recommend resources instantaneously. But traditional archive arrangement and description is based on provenance, or it does not cater for that. So for example, if someone is looking for records on a particular topic, say the economy of Singapore, they would need to have a certain level of knowledge of who might have created the records or which public agency would have the function relating to that record and therefore have those records about that topic. So we are looking at how to create and cater to a wider range of users from the general public to the more experienced archival researcher. And parallel to those this development, we also have developments in our archival description. So before going into the whole records in context standard, let's take a look at our journey thus far. So the National Archives of Singapore had custom metadata schemas prior to the introduction of ISAD-G, which is the incumbent archival standard practice. So the metadata schemas was based on basic archival principles, but they were separated by formats because of the way our collection is being shaped over the years. When ISAD-G was introduced, the thinking was that we would adopt ISAD-G, but to selectively choose elements that we know and understand to apply it so that it will not confuse users and the archivists. That resulted in our current metadata schema, which is ISAD-G based, but we have elements that are outside of ISAD-G. As part of the library board, we also crosswalk the Dublin Core as a mean to integrate with library resources. And looking to the future, we are hoping to apply library subject headings to archival description. And this is new and it's not typical for archival description because traditional archival description does not describe subjects. So we are also looking at RiC adoption and having a RiC-based system. We are also looking to integrating our records with library resources using linked data. So that is for the future. And this is where RiC comes and ties everything together. So what is RiC? The RiC stands for Records in Context, as we've already mentioned. The ontology is developed by EGAD, by the International Council on Archives, ICA. It's meant to replace ISAD-G, which is the incumbent descriptive standard. So it's a specific implementation of the Records in Context conceptual model, formally expressed in our. So it allows the archival community to make available archival description using the techniques of linked open data, employing a conceptual vocab and structure that is specific to archival description. And what is specific to archival description? I think you might hear us say this quite a few times in this presentation. It's provenance and also that's key to capturing context about a record and how we manage those records. So this is embodied by the 4 core entities that you see here, or the record resource, the very closely related instantiation, the agent, so who is performing the action and the activity, what action is being done. So these records, these entities captures the origins of the records, provenance and source, the ongoing history, and allow us to have better intellectual control over the records. And these are core to the work of archivists and records managers around the world. And coming to what we would like to share about the records in context proof of concept, which we have done. So together with docuteam, we had conducted a proof of concept between October 2024 and March 2025. So the objectives of the proof of concept was to assess the feasibility of us moving from the existing ISAD-G based metadata to records in context. It's for us to test the conceptual mapping of current NAS databases, and we would also want to implement an initial RiC-based system using docuteam context so that our archivists have a tangible system to experience and play with, so that there is it's not conceptual, there is a tangible RiC-based system that they can interact with. And with that, I'll pass the time over to Jamie, who will elaborate more about what we have done during this proof of concept.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me. So firstly, I'll go over at a very high level the activities that we carried out as part of this proof of concept. So to start off, we focused on capability development, and our priorities were really to make sure that everyone was on the same page and to ensure that there was clear communication with our consultancy. So we signed up our staff for courses on fundamental principles of archival arrangement and description, linked data, Sparkle, control vocabularies, so on and so forth. And then we also conducted some workshops to familiarize our archivists with the RiC standard. And in parallel, we created documentation about our existing systems. So as Sandy mentioned, we have many different formats of records, and this data is actually stored in 8 separate databases with 8 different ISAD-based metadata schemas. So if we want to, work on integration and mapping between databases, you need to have a firm understanding, of each of these metadata schemas. So we captured things like, not just obligation, repeatability, but also how archivists created data and, whether this data is visible and indexed on our front-end public-facing platform. So finally, and this is the area that kind of concerned the consultancy the most, firstly, we conceptually modeled each of these databases using RiC entities, relations, and attributes. Afterwards, we kind of took a look at the actual data and came up with approaches to transform this data programmatically into something that could be ingested into an RDF-based system. And the final stage that we are still at, and I foresee that this will be going on for quite some time. We are refining the conceptual model. So this means that we're navigating the system, looking through the data, playing with search and retrieval, and then going back to tweak the conceptual model where necessary. Next slide. So now I'll talk about how our findings from this proof of concept address the problem statements that Sandy mentioned earlier on. So the first one was about complex administrative history in government. So this is something that, it's very complex, but archives really cannot run away from it because this provenance of records fundamentally influences how we manage them. So, if I have a government file record that is created by a defunct agency, do I know who the successor is, who succeeded it in terms of government functions, so that, I can seek copyright clearance, I can, get the file reviewed and declassified, so on and so forth. So what RiC does is allow us to explicitly capture the relationships between these government entities. And, so it's not just capturing agent to agent relations, but also agent to activity. So you can capture the specific government functions that an agency performs. So as you can see from the screenshot on the right, this is the node representing the National Archives of Singapore, and you can view its precursor agencies as well as the parent-child relationships that it is involved in. Next slide. The second problem statement concerned, the ability to balance the descriptive needs of a diverse collection with integrated search and retrieval. So, before we even talk about integrating specific fields, having a pool of common agents, places, and concepts already supports cross-collection discovery. And, to go one step further, referencing RiC entities, relations, and attributes lets us, have a common language so that we can understand each other and we can be more precise when we talk about bits of information that represent attributes of our collection. So, for example, each of the different bases may have a different way of describing identifiers, reference code, accession number, but because we map all these back to the same RiC class, which is an identifier, this allows us to, perform search across identifiers across databases. Next slide. And yeah, finally, RiC really helped us to think about how we can meet, these evolving information needs. And firstly, it allowed us to provide, multi-dimensional exploration as opposed to the strictly hierarchical exploration that we traditionally associate with navigating archives. So, if any of you are familiar with archives, you would know that traditionally they are grouped hierarchically, and this also influences how they are described. So, the traditional kind of like navigation aid is a finding aid, it's encoded in XML, which is, a very hierarchical structure, and it supports, navigation down a collection. But, it doesn't really help you to explore across collections through relationships between entities that are contained within that collection. So because we are moving away from, an XML-based structure to something that is graph-based, this allows us to retain hierarchical groupings through like typing, through creation of categories, while also supporting non-hierarchical discovery, because now users can now jump from node to node, like how we explore Wikipedia rabbit holes. And this improves user experience because firstly, it would reduce the need for them to acquire database-specific search strategies. Secondly, it reduces the need for them to have specialized knowledge. For example, as Sandy mentioned earlier on about government agencies, because these relationships are captured explicitly. And finally, they no longer have to, think about every possible permutation of a specific keyword, or how something was spelled in the past, because all these alternate names and associated terms are related to a specific entity. Next slide. So now I'll kind of give a more concrete example based on our existing system and then the proof of concept testing environment. These are screenshots from Archives Online, which is our existing search platform. And basically the point of this slide is to show that if you want to do a basic search, a keyword-based search, you can do that across databases, and it looks through all the fields in all the databases. But if you want to do something more precise, you want to look in specific fields, you want to use like Boolean operators, it's not possible across databases. Next slide. This is an example of an advanced search form, and most of these search fields basically perform string matching. So it's not really entity-based or semantic. Next slide. And then, so therefore you run into problems like, the relationships between records are based on strings, not semantics. So we have this record here, it's called Coroners, Inquests, and Inquiries, and the related records are Coronation of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So anyone with human contextual knowledge would know that this is not related at all. Next slide. So because we work to conceptually map the different databases, and for the example I gave earlier on about all the different types of identifiers pointing back to an identifier class, this allows us to perform advanced search using specific fields across all different collections and implementing logic as well. Next slide. So at a very high level, these are some of the challenges that we encountered. The first one is that when you're working with someone external to your organization, like a consultancy, you can't really count on them to know about legacy processes and kind of like the organizational quirks that you have. So you really need your staff to know what's going on, essentially, to be able to kind of verify information, verify anything that's proposed by the consultancy, such as a conceptual model. So you can't really run away from this and acquiring specialized knowledge about this. And then I guess a broad challenge would be that because this proof of concept occurred over 6 months, we didn't really have the ability to study integration into workflows and into our broader technical infrastructure. And when we adopt RiC in the future, this is something that definitely needs to be studied, because if any of you are working in a government agency, you know that there are many guidelines and restrictions about what can be done in your technical infrastructure, and this is for compliance and it's for safety and stuff like that. So this is something that needs to be studied in depth for real world application. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit into some of the challenges. I'd like to reiterate that RiC is not a replacement for traditional archival capabilities. So as I pointed out earlier on, you need traditional knowledge about your collection, about government agencies if you're handling public records, to develop this conceptual mapping and to verify links that you create between related entities. And what's also very helpful is having staff on hand who have kind of more general knowledge about how to handle data and how to handle metadata, because they would understand problems with your data quality and what needs to be addressed before you can ingest this data into an RDF-based system, so that no problems occur. So before you want to embark on a similar project, you should review whether you have archivists who already possess these capabilities. Next slide. So to debunk a misconception, you don't exactly need, in this circumstance, you don't exactly need advanced technical skills to create linked data. And this was kind of a problem that we kind of encountered with our fellow archivists in NAS, because when you talk about linked data, you show the graph and everything, everyone gets very intimidated, especially when you're just talking about it theoretically or conceptually. So actually, this doesn't have to be a very complex process, because if your information system is designed specifically for archival description, this really simplifies the process. So the screenshot on the left is a form in RiC-based, which is a very commonly used cataloging tool across the world. And on the right is a data entry form in docuteam context, which is the proof of concept testing system. So you can see that the experience is virtually indistinguishable. And I would say the biggest hurdle actually is kind of getting your archivists to wrap their head around an entity relationship-based model of description. Next slide. Yeah, and finally, it's important to ensure that you are able to, capture the information that you want to without adding too much additional work for your archivists, because, RiC can have this whole suite of entities, relations, and attributes for you. But if your workflows don't already capture this information, then, it can be very, very labor intensive. So, if you want to adopt RiC, you should consider whether the data that you want is already captured in a more upstream stage. Can data be reused from somewhere? Is this data in a format that's conducive to being ingested into a linked data system? And if not, how are you going to work around this? So this segues quite nicely into what Haliza will be talking about, which is how NAS tapped on existing resources from NLB for this proof of concept. Okay, Haliza, on to you.
Hi, thanks, Jamie. I hope everyone can hear me. So I have only this one slide to share, and as portrayed by it, you can see that we have actually done quite a lot of work in creating local topic taxonomies and name authorities for these entity classes that you see on the slide: people, places, organizations, historical events, and topics. And these comprise about 2 million terms in our 4 official languages. In Singapore, we have our official language of English, but we also have 3 other languages: Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. So what we've done is we've created a knowledge graph for our library metadata using BibFrame and schema.org, and this was shared at the LD4 conference last year by our consultant, Richard Wallace. So on the right of the screen, you can see the use of these knowledge graph entities and relationships on the Singapore Infopedia site, which recommends tightly related resources to the user based on linked data. And this linked data is from our knowledge graph that has these entities that I was talking about earlier, which we also share with the archives side of the house. With RiC, we hope to be able to be more pervasive with such descriptions and change literally strings to things. So from a library service, you can see that the user will get linked archival records that will lead them to the resource on Archives Online, the National Archives website that Jamie was showing us earlier. And we hope with RiC that we will be able to fine-tune the accuracy of the relationships better, so that our users will have improved discovery of the resources for the library and archives in Singapore. Thank you. Over to you, Sasha.
Thank you all for that incredible overview and your case study. It's very exciting. We do still have some time, folks. If you have any questions, we can take those here in the Zoom or in Slack. We have one here now. How are the patrons reacting to the new tools and features?
Sorry, can you say that again, Sasha?
Absolutely. How are the patrons reacting to the new tools and features?
Oh, I think our public is actually spoiled for choice, and they've just taken it as part and parcel of the deliverables that a government agency like us will deliver in order to make their lives easier. And personally, I find it gels in with my own beliefs that in order to make, in order to improve library services and encourage our users to use library and archive services, we have to do a lot of work at the back end. As you can see from what we've done over the years and now what the National Archives is embarking on. The more that is being done by professionals like us at the back end, and it should be towards one objective, and that is to make it easier for the users to retrieve their resources. Not sure if Jamie and Sandy has any other things to say.
Yeah, I guess to add on, if y'all scan the QR code and take a look at Infopedia and how the widget is actually implemented, I would say that it's quite subtle, but that's not always a bad thing because previously I did work on implementing like a context-based search for RiC formatted metadata, which allows you to do very, very complex contextual queries. And when testing with users, that did not go down so well because, I think there is kind of this like psychological overhead. Oh, this is a new format of this is a new type of technology. This is something I have to learn. So sometimes subtle is better. And I would say this depends on, your user base. It depends on the kind of information landscape of your own country and your own context. Yeah, that's all. Sandy, do you have anything to add?
You guys covered it very well. So I was wondering if we have time, perhaps we could also like go through the demo, maybe show a little bit of the context.
You have about 4 minutes left in the session, and we have one more question for you. So I'm not sure how
Oh, we
much
do
time
have?
you need to
Okay,
demo.
great.
Yep, we have one more in the Q&A.
Oh,
So
okay, sure.
did you use any specific tools for developing and recording your taxonomy work?
Yes, definitely. Otherwise, it would not have been possible for us to handle all 2 million terms. We actually use Synaptica, which is a vocabulary management system for taxonomy, for taxonomies and name authorities. These are only applicable to the local vocabularies that we have, largely because for the library world, you need some kind of a literary warrant before we can publish the names on, say, a Library of Congress name authorities. Whereas for digital resources, it's not necessarily published in that sense. It's more, performances or creators, of photographers, those kind of objects which people find useful, such as on our website, the Singapore Memory website. So for these, it will definitely not make it into LCA enough. So what we've done is create these local names so long that they fulfill certain criteria that our team has established the policies and guidelines. And then we create them according to Z39.19, the rules for the monolingual thesaurus creation. Yeah.
And I guess to add on, it's quite cool because even though NAS only came under the library board in 2012, our current indexing systems are already synchronized with the vocabularies that Haliza was talking about. So for certain fields like source or transferring agency, these are actually synchronized with what terms the library side creates and manages. So it's actually quite seamless for us to kind of collaborate and use these controlled vocabularies. Yeah.
The issue now is where do we put the subject terms in ISAD using the template that we have currently, which is why the introduction of RiC will help a lot in that. Oh, Sandy, do you want to show us the demo?
And we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if you have any demos we might be able to link out to share to folks
So
post-conference.
I think we just have like a series of screenshots to show everyone what it looks like. So if that
Do you
helps
think you
a
can
little.
cover it in 1 minute?
Oof,
Speed
that might be
run.
tough. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Hopefully this works. think that skipped over for some reason. You can see here.
Mhm.
Okay, I think this might work. Okay,
It's
so
10:30 already. I mean, sorry.
okay,
In
sorry,
our
sorry,
time.
guys. Yeah, that did not work. Yeah, but we could share the slides.
Yeah, we'll work on getting the
on
slides
session.
shared.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
If you have slides, if you guys want to record anything, and I can share it out to folks too as well, so they can see everything. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your case study, and I'm excited to see next year where you all are and how it moves forward.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.